I grew up in a family that looked perfectly normal from the outside. The kind of family neighbors would politely call close-knit, even though anyone who actually knew us understood that there was a lot of tension underneath. My two older cousins, Melissa and Andrea, were 5 and 7 years older than me. When we were kids, they treated me like the tag-along little brother whose opinions didn't matter. They always found a way to boss me around, borrow things without asking, or guilt-trip me into doing chores they didn't want to do. There was one thing that connected all of us: my grandmother's house. She lived in a quiet, older neighborhood in northern Pennsylvania. A small white house with a porch swing and a huge backyard garden. To me, that house was magic. Summer barbecues, fireflies, picking apples, the smell of her cinnamon rolls. All of it lived in my memory as something warm and safe. Before she passed away a decade ago, she always said, "This house belongs to all of you. Family comes first." But there was no will. She trusted that her kids and grandkids would work it out. Of course, that was wishful thinking. After she died, I was 20, juggling college, a part-time job, and student loans. I didn't want to get involved in property decisions. So when Melissa and Andrea told everyone that they would take responsibility for the house, I didn't question it. At the time, it sounded reasonable. They were older, they lived closer, and I assumed they were acting in good faith. Over the years, my life changed a lot. I moved to another state, built a career, worked my way out of debt, and eventually reached a point where I felt proud of myself. But with every visit home, something felt this sarcastic smile and say, "Oh, look who it is, Mr. Big Shot. Must be nice making that tech salary. Andrea wasn't any better. Don't forget about us little people. Okay? Some of us don't get free money falling from the sky." I never understood where this hostility came from. I had always tried to help them, fixing their laptops, giving rides, buying their kids Christmas gifts. But the better things got for me, the colder and more passive-aggressive they became. And speaking of their kids, Melissa's son, Tyler, was basically a human wrecking ball. No boundaries, no manners, zero supervision. Andrea's two daughters weren't much better. Constantly touching everything, grabbing things off shelves, digging through people's bags, and melting down the moment you told them no. At first, I thought I was just being sensitive. Kids are kids, right? But when a child deliberately breaks someone's belongings, opens drawers in someone else's house, or screams at adults, and the parent just shrugs, it's not a phase. It's parenting. Still, I tried not to let it get to me. They were family. I wanted things to stay peaceful. But everything changed the year I flew home for Thanksgiving and decided, for the first time ever, to stop by my grandmother's old house without telling Melissa and Andrea ahead of time. In my mind, the house was still sitting empty most of the year, just like they'd always said. What I found instead was the first crack in the perfect lie they'd been telling all of us for nearly a decade. The drive to my grandmother's old house was strangely emotional. I hadn't been there in over a year, and part of me expected everything to look frozen in time. The same quiet street, the same maple tree out front, the same old mailbox with her faded last name on it. But when I turned the corner, there were three cars I immediately realized in the driveway. Not familiar family cars, completely unfamiliar ones. The porch light was on, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. The trash cans were overflowing, and the mailbox had a brand new lock on it. I sat in my car for a moment, confused. Melissa and Andrea always insisted the house was just sitting empty, waiting until the family decided whether to renovate it or sell it. That was the story for years. They said they checked on it occasionally, but nobody lived there. So why were there multiple cars? Why was there movement inside? Curiosity got the best of me. I stepped out of my car and walked up to the front porch. The moment I approached, a dog started barking from inside. A big one. Then I heard footsteps. The door opened, and a woman I had never seen before stared at me. She looked startled, almost defensive. "Can I help you?" Yeah," I said, unsure of how to phrase it. "I'm a family. This is my grandmother's old house." She frowned. "We've been renting this place for almost 2 years." I blinked. "Renting?" "Yes," she said slowly, as if I were the one lying. "From the owners. We signed a lease through a property manager." My stomach dropped. Property manager. Elise. Rent. Nothing made sense. The woman narrowed her eyes. Did you need something? I can call the landlord if you want. But I already knew. My cousins. They had been running this place behind everyone's backs. I'm sorry, I said. There must be a misunderstanding. I'll check with my family. I walked back to my car feeling like someone had punched me in the chest. It wasn't about the money. I genuinely didn't care if the house brought in $300 or $3,000. The secrecy. The years of passive-aggressive comments while they quietly profited from property that did not legally belong to them. On the way back to my parents' house, I ran through a mental timeline. 10 years of the house is empty. 10 years of we're just maintaining it. 10 years of shaming me for not helping with repairs they claimed they were paying for. 10 years of subtle guilt trips that I wasn't contributing to the family. But all this time they were renting out the house, taking the income for themselves and lying to everyone, including me, my parents, and even my uncle. When I got home that evening, I told my mom what I saw. She went pale. They told us it was vacant, she said quietly. They always said they didn't want strangers living there. My dad shook his head. Of course they rented it. I knew something was wrong when they refused to talk numbers at last year's barbecue. Felt like the ground had shifted under my feet. The house that held all of my childhood memories had secretly become their personal money machine. And this was just the beginning. Because once I confronted them, everything the same day. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Years of fake smiles. Years of snarky comments about my career. Years of guilt-tripping me for not helping with the family property, while they pocketed rent checks every month. By the time Melissa and Andrea showed up at my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner the next afternoon, I was done pretending. They walked in laughing loudly, kids running everywhere. Melissa's son Tyler knocked over a vase within 2 minutes, and Andrea's daughters had already opened the pantry looking for snacks. Hey, look who finally decided to visit, Melissa said, giving me a hug that felt like a chokehold. We weren't sure you'd show. Of course he did, Andrea added with a smirk. He needs family time to balance his stressful tech billionaire lifestyle. They laughed. I didn't. After everyone sat down, I took a breath. Hey, can I talk to you both outside for a minute? Melissa glanced at Andrea with an annoyed expression, but they followed me onto the porch. Andrea crossed her arms. What's this about? She said sharply. I didn't sugarcoat it. I went to Grandma's house yesterday. The change in their faces was instant. Melissa froze. Andrea's lips tightened. Okay? Melissa said slowly. There were people living there, I continued. They've been renting it for 2 years. They said they have a lease. A long silence. Then Andrea spoke first. Too quickly. They weren't supposed to answer the door. Melissa shot her a look so sharp it could have cut glass. Andrea shut her mouth. That one sentence told me everything I needed to know. So it's true, I said quietly. You've been renting out the house. Melissa's carefully composed mask cracked. We did what we had to do, she snapped. The place needed repairs. You never helped. Someone had to pay for upkeep. That's not what this is, I said. You hid it from everyone. Don't act like you care. You moved away. You barely come home. We live here. We deal with everything. What exactly do you deal with? I asked. Collecting rent checks? Melissa's voice shot up an octave. You don't get it. You're always off in your fancy apartment, making money, traveling. This has nothing to do with my job, I said firmly. This is about lying to the entire family. Melissa's face twisted with anger and embarrassment. We deserve something for everything we've done, she suddenly yelled. Grandma trusted us. She would have wanted us to manage the house. Maybe, I said, but she definitely wouldn't have wanted you to turn it into a secret business and cut everyone else out. Andrea scoffed. Cut you out of what? You didn't even want the place. That doesn't give you the right to take it. Melissa looked like she was about to explode. Andrea looked like she wanted to disappear. And then Melissa said the line that showed me exactly how they saw me. You have money. We don't. So stop acting like you're the victim. I stared at her. So you think that makes it okay to lie? To profit off something that isn't yours? Andrea rolled her eyes dramatically. That house is basically ours anyway. We've been handling it for 10 years. Handling it? I repeated. Or stealing from it? Melissa stepped closer. Watch your tone. You're not taking that house from us. We earned it. That was the moment I understood. They didn't feel guilty. They didn't feel caught. They felt entitled. Entitled to the house. Entitled to the money. Entitled to control the narrative. And the worst part? They genuinely believed that I was the problem. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, "We're not done talking about this." Then I walked back inside, leaving them both standing on the porch, pale, furious, and scared, because they knew the truth. Their secret wasn't a secret. Thanksgiving dinner had barely started, but the tension was already thick enough to taste. My parents could sense something was wrong, but Melissa and Andrea forced these awkward smiles like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, their kids had turned the house into a disaster zone. Tyler, Melissa's son, was running full speed through the hallway, slamming into walls like he was testing their durability. Andrea's daughters had climbed onto the couch and were jumping on it, shoes and all. "Hey," my dad said gently, "could you please not jump on the furniture?" The oldest girl glared at him and shouted, "Mom says you're not the boss of me." Andrea just laughed and waved it off. "They're kids. Relax. Relax." A vase had already been broken. A candle was knocked over. My mom's favorite framed photo was now crooked and smeared with fingerprints. And Melissa's response? Boys will be boys. I felt my patience thinning by the second. Still, we all tried to sit down for dinner. My mom had worked for 2 days preparing everything, the turkey, the stuffing, the pies. She loved holidays and always tried to make them special. But the moment we began eating, the kids started screaming because they didn't like any of this food. Melissa handed Tyler her phone and let him watch videos at full volume. Andrea's daughters fought over who got the prettiest spoon, and within seconds one of them knocked over a glass of juice that spilled across the table and onto the floor. My mom jumped up to clean it, but Andrea didn't even look up. "They need to learn to express themselves," she said casually. Gentle parenting, you know? The moment everything snapped came right after dessert. My mom had brought out pumpkin pie, and as she set down the plates, Tyler suddenly grabbed the ceramic pie dish, lifted it like a frisbee, and tried to slide it across the table. My mom gasped, "No, no!" It slipped from his hands, crashed to the floor, and shattered. The room went silent for a moment. Then Melissa said, "Oh, come on. It's just a dish." Couldn't believe my ears. My mom bent down to pick up the pieces, her hands trembling. Andrea and Melissa didn't move an inch to help. Their kids were already laughing and running to the living room. Something inside me broke. "Enough," I said sharply. Melissa looked offended. "What's your problem now?" "My problem," I said slowly, "is that you let your kids destroy this house, disrespect everyone here, and act like it's normal." Andrea crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I've ignored this for years. You don't discipline them. You don't teach them boundaries. You let them break things and then guilt everyone else for reacting." Melissa scoffed. "You don't have kids. You don't get it." "Thank God," I said, "because if this is what parenting looks like, I'm doing everything right." Her face contorted with anger. Andrea jumped in. "You think you're better than us just because you have money? That has nothing to do with this," I said. "This is about basic respect." Melissa raised her voice. "You always judge. You act perfect. You don't help with the house, with the family." That word again. Family. As if it only counted when it benefited them. "You mean the house you secretly profited from?" I shot back. The air immediately shifted. My parents froze. In a low voice, stopped running. "We told you not to bring that up again." "And I told you," I said. "We're not done talking about it." Melissa slammed her hand on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "You're not taking anything from us. That house is ours. Deal with it." My dad finally spoke, calm but cold. "That house was your grandmother's. It belonged to everyone equally. Melissa glared. We put in the work. We deserve it. You put in the work of hiding rental income? I asked. The last thin thread snapped. Andrea grabbed her purse, stood up, and yelled across the room. Kids, we're leaving. Apparently we're not welcome. Melissa stood up too, muttering under her breath about snakes and traitors and ungrateful freeloaders. They gathered their kids, who were still half laughing, half confused, and stormed out the door. The house fell silent. The moment the door slammed shut, my mom quietly sat down at the table and looked at the broken pie dish on the floor. That was my mother's, she whispered. She gave it to me when I got married. And for the first time in years I realized this wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about the house. This was about a decade of disrespect. A decade of entitlement. A decade of them taking advantage of everyone around them. And I wasn't going to let it continue. And Andrea stormed out. Anymore. The house felt unnaturally quiet. My parents tried to go back to cleaning, but I could tell both of them were shaken. Not just by the fight, but by the realization that so much had been hidden from all of us. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept replaying the scene in my head. Their shock when I mentioned the renters. Their panic when Andrea slipped about the tenants. Not supposed to answer the door. And Melissa's outburst claiming they earned the house. There was a bigger story here. One they'd been working hard to bury. The next morning I decided to dig deeper. I'm not the type to get involved in family drama, but this wasn't drama anymore. This was deception and possibly something illegal. I started by Googling the address of my grandmother's house. What I found made my stomach twist. A full rental listing, with photos, on 3 different websites. There were even reviews from previous tenants. Great place, quiet neighborhood, nice backyard, responsive landlord. We stayed here for 4 months while waiting for our house to finish construction. No issues with the property manager. Responsive landlord? Property manager? That wasn't a maintenance situation. That was a full-blown rental operation. The listing was professionally staged, clean living room, updated furniture, bright lighting. It looked nothing like the house I remembered. And then I found something even worse. Under the listing, in small print, managed by M&A Home Solutions. My heart dropped. M&A, Melissa and Andrea. They weren't just renting the house. They had created a business with its initials. They were running the place like a company built on property that didn't belong solely to them. I clicked through every link I could find. Their business had been active for nearly 7 years. Not recently, tenants in and out of the house over the years. Short-term rentals, long-term rentals, month-to-month leases, everything. I even found their LLC registration. And the listed owners? Melissa Anders and Andrea Collins. No mention of the rest of the family. No transparency. No shared income. No permission. It got worse. I dug through property records. At some point, they had quietly added themselves as the primary contacts for the county tax office. They weren't legal owners, but they acted like it. They had even applied for a homestead exemption 2 years earlier, which is illegal if you don't actually live in the property. Everything they were doing was shady at best, and absolutely unlawful at worst. The final blow came when I found a PDF form they uploaded for tenants. It listed emergency contact for landlord, with Melissa's number, and alternate contact/co-manager with Andrea's email. They weren't hiding this from the world. They were hiding it from us, the family. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. All the comments over the years suddenly made sense. The guilt-tripping, the we do everything for the family property speeches, the constant complaints about expenses and repairs, the subtle resentment toward my career. They didn't resent me for succeeding. They resented me because success made me less dependent on them and harder to manipulate. They'd expected everyone to stay quiet, uninvolved, in the dark. And now their entire operation had been exposed. Just then, my dad walked into the room. "You're up early," he said. I didn't sleep. He sat beside me. "You're still upset?" "I found something," I said quietly. You need to see this. First, I turned the laptop toward him. Then his expression shifted, from confusion to disbelief to anger. 7 years, he muttered. They've been renting it for 7 years. They made a business out of it, I said. A real one. And they never told anyone. My dad sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. I always wondered, he said. Every time we asked about the house, they got defensive. Now I know why. I closed the laptop. There was no going back now. We have to confront this, I said. We can't let them keep doing this. My dad nodded, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He hated confrontation almost as much as I did. But this wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was about deception. This was about family property. This was about respect, something Melissa and Andrea had abandoned years ago. And if I didn't take action, they were going to keep the house forever. Dinner had barely finished when the mood in the room shifted. The laughter Daniel had offered out of politeness faded, and the fake warmth from his sisters began dissolving into something colder, heavier, calculated. Jenna was the first to move. She stood, cleared her throat dramatically, and placed both hands on the back of Daniel's chair, almost like she wanted to trap him there. So, she said brightly, there's actually something we wanted to talk to you about. There it was, the real reason for the invitation. Daniel leaned back slowly, calm on the outside, but already bracing inside. Melissa slid a folder across the table toward him. We've been dealing with some unexpected expenses, she began. The kids had disappeared upstairs. Their father sat silently, stiff, like he'd been waiting for this moment too. Expenses, Daniel repeated. What kind? Melissa gave a long, shaky sigh, as if delivering tragic news. The house, she said. The place we grew up in? It needs repairs. New roof, plumbing fixes, between them. Stuff we can't afford. Jenna bit her lip dramatically. Melissa lowered her eyes to look vulnerable. It was a performance. So, Jenna continued, we were thinking, since you're doing really well, maybe you could help us out, just until things stabilize. Daniel's stomach tightened, and then the truth came out. Well, Melissa corrected, it's not just repairs. We may have fallen a little behind on taxes too, and utilities, and, insurance. Daniel stared at them, feeling his pulse rise. How far behind? He asked. The sisters exchanged a glance, one of those silent sibling communications he was never a part of. Melissa whispered, around 7,000. Each, Jenna added quickly. So 14 total. And we wouldn't ask, Melissa hurried, if it wasn't important. You know, we're raising kids. It's not like we have spare money lying around. Now everything clicked. The sudden affection, the warm invitations, the fake nostalgia, the promises of reconnecting. This wasn't about family. This was a business transaction they hadn't bothered to dress up well enough. Daniel exhaled slowly. Guys, why am I just hearing about this? Why didn't you ask Dad? Their father shifted uncomfortably. He looked apologetic but silent, like he wished he could disappear into the chair. Jenna crossed her arms. Oh please, Dad's on a fixed income. And honestly, you're the successful one. You should want to help. There it was, resentment sharpened and weaponized. Melissa leaned forward. And after all we've done for you growing up, Daniel almost laughed. Their definition of helping had always meant controlling. But the real breaking point wasn't the money. It wasn't the manipulation. It wasn't even the guilt-tripping. It was what Jenna said next. You live in a fancy apartment, travel everywhere, and act like you're better than us. The least you can do is support your own family. Softly. The room went quiet. If you walk away now after knowing we're struggling, that says a lot about you. That did it. It wasn't a request anymore. It wasn't even a guilt trip. It was an attack on his character. Daniel stood up slowly, pushing the chair back. I'm not responsible for the financial mess you created, he said calmly. And you don't get to weaponize family when it benefits you. Jenna scoffed. So you're refusing? Daniel looked her dead in the eye. I'm refusing to be used. And before either of them could respond, before more guilt, more twisting, more rehearsed speeches, he walked out. Their father rose halfway, calling softly, "Daniel!" But Daniel just shook his head. He wasn't angry. He wasn't hurt. He was exhausted. He got into his car, closed the door, and sat there in the silence. And for the first time in years, he realized he didn't need their approval. He didn't need to keep the peace. He didn't need this version of family. That moment, the cold night air, the echo of his sister's voices fading behind him, became the exact second their relationship fractured. And nothing would ever be the same after that. Daniel didn't go home right away. He drove aimlessly for almost an hour, past quiet suburban streets, closed stores, and gas stations lit by harsh fluorescent lights. His mind replayed every word from that dinner, every facial expression, every guilt-laced sentence his sisters threw at him. By the time he finally parked outside his apartment, something inside him had shifted. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. For the first time in his adult life, he saw his family not through nostalgia, not through obligation, but through reality. They didn't want him. They wanted what he had. The next morning, he woke up to exactly what he expected. 12 missed calls from Jenna, 8 from Melissa, 6 long voice messages, 4 texts from his father, and 1 furious group message demanding he do the right thing. The tone shifted. The sisters went from, "Please, we really need help," to, "We can work something out, just call us," to, "You can't ignore your own family," to, "Unbelievable. Money changed you. You're selfish." It didn't faze him the way it once would have. He realized something important. People who love you don't switch from affection to hostility based on what you can give them. He put his phone on silent and finally listened to his father's messages. His voice was tired, gentle, apologetic. "Son, I didn't know what they were planning. I'm sorry you were dragged into it." Another message. "You don't deserve the way they spoke to you. Take care of yourself. Okay?" His father never once asked him to pay. He just wanted him to be okay. Daniel called him back, and they talked for nearly an hour. Not about money, not about the house, not about the conflict, just life, work, small things. For the first time in years, it felt like a real relationship between father and son. But as for the sisters, Daniel opened the group chat, read none of the messages, and typed only 3 words. "I'm done. Goodbye." Then he blocked both of them, calls, texts, social media, everything. A weight lifted off his chest instantly. Not the kind of relief that comes from running away, but the kind that comes from finally choosing yourself. Weeks passed. Life felt quieter, calmer, more intentional. There were no surprise calls asking for favors, no guilt trips disguised as family check-ins, no emotional whiplash of being praised one day and blamed the next. Daniel finally had room. He took a short trip to Arizona. He started going to therapy not because he was broken, but because he was healing. And slowly, very slowly, he began building a life that wasn't tied to people who drained him. His father visited him a month later. They had dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Just the 2 of them. No sisters. No drama. No manipulation. Just peace. At one point, his father looked at him and said quietly, "You know, sometimes letting go is the only way to protect yourself." Daniel nodded. "I know," he said. "I finally get it." By spring, Daniel hadn't heard a word from his sisters. Not because they didn't try, but because there was no longer a door to knock on. He wasn't angry at them anymore. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't resentful. He simply moved on. And that was the real ending. Not the conflict. Not the money. Not the final argument. The real ending was choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over guilt, boundaries over obligation. Daniel didn't lose his family. He lost people who refused to treat him like family. And in that loss, he finally found himself.